Thank you for joining Wars of the Rosies as we continue with part 14, The Secret Doctrine in the First Degree. From the Lost Word, Its Hidden Meaning by George H. Steinmetz. Chapter 13, The Secret Doctrine in the First Degree. In the physical degree, the lessons are learned through the senses. One first meets with bodily resistance. This is physical, as described by the answer to the question later asked regarding this experience. How did you know? Once within, the candidate is for the first time symbolically confronted with universal law. This too is physical analogy, using a sharp instrument as the basis. The candidate's own reaction dictates whether or not he is thereby injured. He who conforms to the ceremony discovers the barrier removed at the proper time, and he is allowed to proceed. While strictly a material degree, it is necessary even here to interlude what may be termed a spiritual note, as the aspirant is given a glimpse of hope for the future. He makes the discovery that if one's trust is in deity, his faith is well-founded, that he can rely upon his guidance and fear not. He is informed that he must ask, seek, and knock, but at the same time assurance is given that such asking, seeking, and knocking by the sincere will not be in vain. Even in this material degree, the preparation of the candidate refutes the claim that all of Masonry is in the ritual, for the ritual informs that this preparation is symbolic of the fact that it is the internal and not the external qualities of man which recommended him to Freemasons. Both the bearing of the left knee in preparation and later kneeling thereon, together with the stepping off with the left foot, have far more significance than explained within the lectures. Ward says, the left knee being made bare is an interesting and ancient custom in initiation rites. The reason why the knee should be bare is in order that the naked flesh may come into contact with Mother Earth. While the obligation is taken, we do not know whether the candidate in the hung rite kneels only on his knee. If this is so, it would explain why only one knee has to be bare. But as in the Chinese painting reproduced in this book, the candidates are kneeling on both knees. It would be unsafe to be too dogmatic on the point, although it is quite possible that the artist made them appear thus in order not to disclose the peculiar way in which they knelt. In any case, the left is regarded as feminine, and the connection of the feminine sex with a degree representing rebirth would be sufficient to explain the emphasis laid on the left knee. In the initiation into the hung society, the vanguard, who is comparable to the senior deacon in the Masonic ceremony, leads the candidate to the door and instructs him, enter with the left foot first. Of this, Ward comments, a very widespread custom among members of the Triad Society. It constitutes a sign of recognition, for they are instructed to enter the house of another brother, left foot first. The explanation of the custom probably dates back to very primitive times. In ancient mythology, the preserver is always depicted as trampling with his left foot on the serpent of evil. Thus, Horus plants his left foot on the serpent of Pepi in ancient Egypt. This monster represents spiritual evil, e.g. the devil. It also significantly refers to ignorance, as in the Indian legend of Krishna trampling on the five-headed cobra. Kali also did the same with the giant she slew. The five-headed cobra represents the five senses, which according to that allegory must be cleansed from every evil thought. In medieval pictures of the harrowing of hell, Christ is usually depicted as planting his left foot on the great dragon, Ward goes on to say that further light is shed on the question by Major Sanderson, having spent years in Nessaland, informed him that the natives there, on entering a shed where rice was stored, always entered right foot first, so as not to hurt the spirit who rules over the rice store. Conversely, when trampling on an evil spirit, it is desired to do harm, and the left foot is therefore used. Again, quoting directly from Ward, it will also be remembered that among the ancient races of Greece and Rome, the left was the unlucky side. Hence our word sinister. The left is always regarded as the feminine side. From these facts, we perceive that by stepping off the left foot, first the candidate, in the Hung society, is symbolically taught to trample underfoot the powers of evil, and it is intended that the left foot should imply ill luck to the demon. The feminine aspect of the action shows that the candidate is a passive member of the assembly into which he is being admitted, and not an active one, like the officers. The candidate is presented with a lambskin apron, because the lamb has in all ages been deemed an emblem of innocence. True, exoterically, but here is a surface exposure of that vein of evidence, which we stated runs through the 3 degrees. All Masons are familiar with the biblical allusions to the lamb as an emblem of innocence and purity. We previously noted the reference in the Atharva Veda, indicating its great antiquity. See page 99. The symbology of the lamb has its origin in the astrology of the ancient solar religion, approximately every 2200 years. Due to the precession of the equinoxes, the sun enters the adjoining sign of the zodiac from that which it had occupied. The sun, having traveled through the sign of Taurus, being the bull, entered the sign of Aries, being the celestial lamb. Astrologically, this is referred to as the beginning of a new dispensation. Some occult students state this is symbolized by the exodus of the children of Israel from Egypt. Egypt was the land where the bull was worshipped, and as the sun passed out of Taurus and into Aries, it ushered in the new dispensation of the worship of the celestial lamb. In a broad sense, the Lamb of God, which taketh away the sins of the world. Nor has Christianity any exclusive prerogative to this symbolism, for, as we have seen, the analogy of the Lamb with purity and the virgin birth of a Savior is a myth which predates the Christian era by thousands of years. To the Jew, the symbology of the killing of the lamb and putting of its blood over the doors of the houses represents a new era, a new dispensation. It was the celebration of their first Passover, the passing over of the angel of death, and likewise their passing over from the old life of bondage and servitude in Egypt to the new life of freedom and worship of one living and true God in the promised land. The narrative of the passing over of the angel of death is heavily laden with symbolic import. This was the last of the plagues visited upon the Egyptians by the God of the Israelites to force the Pharaoh to set the children of Israel free. Exoterically, it is a simple Hebrew folktale of how the firstborn of Israel were saved, while the angel smote the firstborn of the households of Egypt. Esoterically, we see the analogy to the angel of death passing over the true Israelite, who is designated by the sign of the Lamb, the mystical emblem of his achieved status. To the Mason, the putting on of the lambskin should also be symbolical of a passing over. The passing over from the old life where he was the slave of ignorance and in bondage of intellectual and spiritual darkness, to that new life which he enters as an initiate, a life enlightened by the great teachings of Masonry. By following these teachings, he will not only be constantly reminded of that purity of life which is so essentially necessary, but he will achieve it. If he ever attains his final goal, he will likewise acquire that state of awareness wherein he knows there is no death. Thus the angel of darkness literally passed over him, just as he passed over the ancient Jew in Egypt, and as he esoterically passes over the true Israelite. The supports of the lodge are three, denominated wisdom, that being the cyclical, strength, that being the physical, and beauty, that being the spiritual. Because there should be cyclical, the mind to perceive and to understand the beauty of the spiritual, and at man's present stage of development, there must also be a physical body to provide the cyclical with a habitation. However, as the ritual in this instance makes quite clear, neither wisdom nor strength are the ultimate objectives, but rather it is the beauty which adorns, the spiritual. The implications of the working tools of this degree cannot be overlooked. In the 24-inch gauge is the combined symbol of each plane of man's being, from the material to the spiritual. It is the horizontal symbol of the physical or material as viewed by the entered apprentice, but fold 1/3 to a 90-degree angle and it becomes the square of the cyclical degree, the principal working tool of the fellow craft. Fold the other third and bring the ends together and it is transformed into an equilateral triangle, symbol of the spiritual which the aspirant hopes to achieve. As speculative Masons, we are taught to make use of the common gavel to divest our hearts and consciences of all the vices and superfluities of life, but we do not thereby prepare them, our hearts and consciences, for anything. It is the mind which is being prepared as a living stone for that spiritual building. The ashlars, too, act as signposts along the road, pointing the way to the traveler. The rough ashlar reminds us of our rude and imperfect state on the material plane. The perfect ashlar of the perfection at which we hope to arrive, the spiritual realm. Here is even added the necessary instructions for the accomplishment and the method of procedure. As should be expected, it is threefold: a virtuous education, our own endeavors, and the blessing of God. This is but another way of stating that God helps those who help themselves. One must know, he must work, and he must be inspired. But it is universal law that he who sincerely strives to acquire knowledge is rewarded in his quest, and if he works, having performed his part of the contract, the blessing of God, the inspiration comes. When the pupil is ready, the master appears. By the trestle board, we are reminded that the operative workman erects his temporal building agreeably to the rules and designs laid down by the master on his trestle board. Here again is instructions how to strive for the spiritual state. One must know what is desired, plan its accomplishment, and follow the plan agreeably to the rules and designs laid down by the master. In other words, in accordance with universal law, the pillar, Jachin, was set up for a definite purpose, and the temple cannot be entered except one pass between two pillars. The four cardinal virtues, temperance, fortitude, prudence, and justice, are taught by analogies to the physical. For this, be reminded, is the material degree of Masonry. Yet practice of these virtues is but putting oneself in that proper position to progress. Little more can be taught the entered apprentice, for after all, even as the name implies, he is but beginning. The inference that there is far more to learn is in that portion of the charge which admonishes him, at your leisure hours, that you may improve yourself in Masonic knowledge, you are to converse with well-informed brethren who will always be ready to give as you will be to receive instruction. Let us consider two questions asked the entered apprentice entirely apart from any implications of the answers. Whence come you, and what came you here to do? It is well within the realm of the possible. In fact, it would be good Masonic procedure if these questions were asked, not with the expectation of receiving the correct answer, but rather to stimulate the apprentice to think, to cause him to ask himself, where did I come from? What am I here to do? The entered apprentice cannot be expected to answer correctly from his own limited experience, but the questions may well start him on his lifelong quest for the answers, and he may eventually recognize the correctness of the mystical answers he is prompted to give at the time. On his return to the lodge, he is placed in the northeast corner, on the first step in masonry, where he stands as, or similar to, a just and upright mason. Not, you there stand a just and upright mason, as some jurisdictions would have it. How can it be known that such is the case? The northeast corner represents that joining place of darkness and light. It signifies that he has just emerged from outer darkness and at long last stands in the light of the east. Likewise, he is on the first step, and the inference is that he is being prepared to take further steps towards his goal. In olden times, the apprentice was a callow youth, bound out to a master, whom he was to serve in return for instruction in the craft. One could expect little enlightenment from the actual apprentice, nor may we constantly expect to gain much, if any, insight into the secret doctrine from the degree of that name. By its very nature, it could not be expected to yield much of a spiritual nature. Yet it is the first step, and the first step must always be taken before subsequent steps can be taken. We will find, as we proceed, that many of the intimations given in the apprentice degree will prove helpful, and that Masonic progression begins the moment an individual, worthy and well qualified, duly and truly prepared, knocks upon the door of the preparation room. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Rosies. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.